Hello, everyone that's joining us this afternoon. We'll be starting in a few minutes' time. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat panel, say where you're coming from today. That would be fantastic. Hi, everyone that's joining us. We'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. So if you want to introduce yourself in the chat panel, that would be great. And we'll get started just right on to. Thanks. Hello, everyone that's joining us today. There's quite a few people coming on in, but I think we're going to get started because we've only got an hour and we've got a lot to get through. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar today, which is a fantastic collaboration between PwC and Good Things Foundation, special event for Get Online Week. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Jess Wilson. I'm the CEO of Good Things Foundation Australia. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this session today. Get Online Week is a fantastic event that we held every year. And we hold events all over the country to raise awareness of digital inclusion and to encourage people to get online. But before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I'm coming to you from Darug and Gurungurra country, which is in the beautiful Blue Mountains just west of Sydney. And I'd like to encourage you to acknowledge country as you introduce yourselves in the chat panel. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that this land has never been ceded and that we continue to have much to learn from Indigenous ways of knowing and being in our country. So it's brilliant. Cass, if you wouldn't mind switching to the next slide while we're here. Cass is driving our slides today. As I said, we're here on Get Online Week. There are over 500 events happening all over the country this week. And so it's brilliant for the second year in a row for us to be doing a webinar with PwC. So it's brilliant to have a familiar face, Vishy Narayanan, with us today, and a new face, Lawrence Goldstone. So brilliant to have you both here to talk about a really important topic, the future of work for not-for-profits, because it's both digital and it's changing. So a fantastic opportunity to talk about this today. But if we move to the next slide, Cass, the Good Things Foundation, for those of you who don't know, although I have seen quite a few familiar names in the chat panel as you're joining us today, is a not-for-profit organisation focused on improving people's lives through digital technology. We believe that everyone in Australia deserves to have access to affordable digital technology and the skills and confidence to use it. I think, Cass, if you can move through, thanks. The reason that we do this is because we know that so many people are missing out on participating in the digital economy. And this Digital Nation is a document that we've created a Digital Nation report this year that outlines the key areas and the key people that are missing out in our digital world. People with disabilities, people who are from First Nations communities, people on low income, low employment, new migrants and refugees. For those of you who are working in the not-for-profit space, this is not new to you. They're the people that you're supporting every day. And we want to make sure that they are able to equally participate in the digital world. And really that comes down to you and comes down to the support that you're able to provide. So Cass, if you can move to the next slide. What we know is that from the new Australian Digital Inclusion Index, which was released last week, 1 in 4 Australians are digitally excluded. That's 28% of our country are digitally excluded. So they're not fully participating in the digital world. 1 in 10 are highly excluded. That means they're really significantly excluded from the digital world. And we also know from the fantastic report by Info Exchange and Connecting Up, which I know there's a new one coming out soon, that 49% of not-for-profit staff are not confident using technology. So that's a significant issue for us. If the people that you're supporting are not able to use technology and the people in your organisations are not confident to use technology, there's a challenge for us there, particularly because of the impact of the pandemic. Now, we know that to reach those people, the Good Things Foundation model is to build capacity in community organisations like yours. And we have a network of over 3,500 community partners across the country that have helped us to reach 1 million people in the last 4 years to build their digital literacy and their digital skills. So it's really, really important that we're here today to talk about what does the future of work look like for not-for-profits? What is the importance of digital and how do we use it to make sure that we're supporting people to fully participate in the community today? Cass, thank you. I suppose what we know is by working through community organisations, by building capacity in community organisations, that we have been able to improve vulnerable people's digital skills, their digital confidence, their online safety, and their social connection. So it's fantastic that these kinds of programs actually do make a real difference in the community. And the Be Connected program that we deliver has been shown to create a social return on investment of $4 for everyone. So that's also a good position for governments and investment in this kind of program. Now, before I continue, I did mean to say at the start that we are recording this event so that it will be able to be shown later on, but also we have closed captioning happening as well. So there is a button down the bottom of your screen that says live transcript. So if you would like the captions to be visible, you just press that button and you'll be able to see that live transcript there. But look, I think you've probably had enough for me. I think I'm really excited for us to be able to introduce our special guests today. And so I'd like to just take a moment to introduce who we've got here. We've got Lawrence Goldstone, who's a partner at PwC. Australia. He leads the firm's future of work agenda. So it's brilliant. And I'm really excited to be hearing from Lawrence today about the great resignation of March 2022, which everybody is talking about at the moment. Lawrence is passionate about disruptive models of change and bringing new perspectives to executives and boards. He brings 25 years local and international experience, and he's the chair of the fantastic organisation Oz Harvest, which is Australia's largest food rescue organisation. Played such an important role over the last 12 to 18 months, particularly. Lawrence also sits on the board of For Purpose Co, and he advises several startups. So we'll hear from Lawrence a little bit later, but I'm going to now introduce Vishy Narayanan, who is the Asia Pacific's Chief Digital and Information Officer at PwC, and he's a member of the Asia Pacific Executive Team. He's passionate about driving change and helping to strengthen PwC's innovative culture and the digital mindset across the whole of the business. He serves as a non-executive director of the boards of Innerwell and, funnily enough, of Good Things Foundation. And I'd just like to congratulate Vishy. He's been on our board for a whole year now, so it's been brilliant to be working alongside Vishy. He's also a non-executive advisor to Curious Thing, an Australian AI startup, and the LBW Trust, which is a charitable trust promoting education in cricket-playing nations, something we share a passion for. So, Vishy, I'm going to hand over to you to talk about digital upskilling now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Good afternoon, all. I'm coming to you from Wallumedegal country in New South Wales, and I'm also really privileged to be on the board of Good Things Foundation. So thank you for the opportunity to come and share some insights with you again. So I'm going to talk about driving digital change and technological change through upskilling. That's really the focus. And then my colleague, Lawrence, who we've worked really closely over the last 12, 18 months, will share some insights on the future of work, and then we'll take some questions. So Cass, if you can go to the next slide, please. So let me start with the good news. So there is we've just launched the PwC's 2021 not-for-profit CEO survey. You can go Google it online and find it. It's got some fantastic insights. So a couple of key insights. Compared to last year, more not-for-profit CEOs have said digital upskilling of employees has become a greater priority as a result of COVID-19. So I think it's no surprise there, but it's great to see that this not-for-profit sector acknowledge this. The second data point that we have is more not-for-profit organizations are providing employees with skills and training to prepare for the impact of new technology, which is a really interesting stat. If you look at what Jess shared earlier, where that was one of the gaps that was called out, is the need to leverage new ways of connecting and collaborating. So that's been good to see. What's most pleasing from our perspective is it's not just the upskilling, it's the benefits that upskilling drives. I know we've all implicitly and tacitly know that the benefits are there, but we're now starting to see that come through the survey. So in this year's result, there's been a 9% uplift in not-for-profits that are tying digital upskilling programs to organizational growth. Obviously, there are other stats like collaboration and effectiveness, but this is a really promising statistic. Also, there's a 10% uplift from last year on not-for-profit CEOs saying they're starting to make progress, albeit moderate, on identifying the kinds of skills that are required to drive future growth. So all this points to the right direction of travel in terms of viewing digital upskilling as a priority. In an environment where the demand for services is up, as you would know, volunteering has been, and revenue is challenged in the last 12 to 18 months, the opportunity that upskilling presents to drive growth, productivity, and employee engagement is critical. And I'm glad that we're starting off on the positive note. But it's not all a bed of roses. There are some challenges. So when we look at the not-for-profit sector and these stats, I think it's interesting when you start to look at the ranges of organizations. So for not-for-profits that are between 10 million to 100 million in revenue, I think we're starting to see over 90% of their employees or people receiving the skills. But if you take a slightly different lens of not-for-profits that are under $250,000 of revenue, then there's a staggering drop of less than 50% of employees that have received the skills. Now that's a pretty big gap. and one that we need to look at. Given more than 66% of charities registered at the SENC are considered small, this is a gap worth noticing and one that we have to collectively look at addressing. The consistent challenge, as you can see right on the right, is 16% increase from last time is the lack of resources to conduct upskilling programs, the budgets, the challenges on budgets. The one thing I'll leave you with as a thought as we go into some examples is there is a direct link between digitization and improved service delivery. And a lot of organizations are under immense pressure to keep your administrative costs low. So are there opportunities to look at your operating costs and looking at how you can deliver your mission more efficiently through digital? And that might help you start to come out of the more traditional ways of doing things and embracing digitization as a way forward. So a food for thought. And I know it's not easy. I know the difficulty of this. I've lived in the other environment as well, but this is just an idea to think about. So if you go to the next slide very quickly. So here are some things we heard. Unsurprisingly, but pleasingly, the number one skill that came up, the top ranked skill, was data analysis and analytics. Now, I know each of you have to provide voluminous amount of reporting and analytics and stats to back to the funding organizations to justify, to look at outcomes, to report on progress. So from my perspective, the fact that this is being highlighted as a key skill area is good, because we can now focus on providing some tangible opportunities to improve data analytics and visualization capabilities. The second, we've all lived through this, right? We're all now experts on Zoom. We're all now experts on Teams and anything that the internet can throw at us in terms of new skills. That didn't happen by accident. That happened by design in terms of what COVID and remote working has taught us over the last 12 to 18 months. So the second ranked skill is training in new software and programs. There is a statistic which is the rate of change in terms of introducing new technology over the last 12 months is greater than the last 20 years. So just think about the amount of change we've all faced. The third, again, is we've all been working remotely behind a screen in our own homes or in remote areas. So the need to still get work done, the need to still collaborate, the need to still work with teams has been critical. So we've taught ourselves how to do that, and that's been an area of focus. So that's been great to see. So if you go to the next slide, please. So how do we bring this to life? I get asked this question a lot. So Vishy, this is all great. You sit in PwC and you do this. I'm sitting in an organization with 5 or 6 people. How do I drive this? And believe me, this is an area we spend a lot of time thinking about because digital upskilling, I would argue, is even more important for smaller organizations and population than some of the largest ones. So first is learning in community. Find opportunities to share what you're learning with your colleagues and introduce an upskilling segment in your monthly team meetings and just have a lunch and learn or a session where you can share. The second is, and this is where I think a lot of organizations have benefited, is encouraging curiosity and experimentation and celebrating the successes. Create the employee of the month, the digital employee of the month, create leaderboards internally to facilitate healthy rivalry and competition. These are all mechanisms where what you could use to drive curiosity and experimentation. But it's really important that whatever skill you learn, especially technology, it needs to be applied within 2 to 3 weeks. Otherwise, it's lost. We have to go back and learn it. So please focus not on just acquiring the skills, but also the application of the skills. And the data example earlier might be a good one to look at skills. Finally, this is the hardest part, dedicating time for learning. And it's not 6 hours, it's not 12 hours, it's an hour a month, it's an hour a fortnight. You'll be surprised how much can be achieved by just dedicating that time. So I want to the next slide, just talk to you about an example of an awesome organization that I've had the privilege of getting to know and spending a little bit of time with their CEO and their board. Meaningful Aging Australia. So they're a charity that focuses on helping the senior citizens to respond to their social, emotional, and spiritual needs. Now, COVID brought significant disruption to their business. They were very much a physical business, and they had to quickly look at how do they use digital to drive their awareness. So their website needed a refresh. They had limited resources. There was a lack of awareness of what they had. What they did was they really looked at their website and said, less is more. So let's not try and put everything in there. Let's streamline it and be more targeted at those that need this information. They launched a very quick, a really good app called Akira. They did it in record time, and that became the focal point of all their activities to drive engagement and awareness. They embraced virtual events like all of us. So the output was, and there was a much better user experience. Their quality resources had more reach through remote events, etc., and regardless of geography, and they received positive feedback. But it wasn't all, again, positive. There are some lessons learned. As we all know, sitting behind a screen and running events can be incredibly exhausting. And Jess would know this just given the week of events you're running this week. It's also the importance of prioritizing these initiatives become really critical in light of time, capacity, constraints. I want to call out one skill that wasn't necessarily called out in the survey, but it's really important, is cyber, right? Um, we might think we're a not-for-profit. Why is cyber important? We don't have the time to invest in that. I would say you just have to look at the front page of the Australian last week, where an organization's patient information was leaked, right? And this is an organization that's in the mental health sector. So unintended consequences, but can be incredibly time consuming and resource sapping if we don't invest in that first. So although it didn't come up as the top 4 or 5 skill, I would ask that each of you please go back and do a little bit of research on your own platforms and technology and look at the cyber capabilities and make sure that you're doing enough to protect not only your own data, but your client's data, your patient data, and your third-party data. And that's an important part of running online businesses. So the last slide that I'll talk to, and then I'll hand over to Jess, is we don't want to just leave you with this talk. We want to give you some resources at the end of it. And I'm really pleased if some of you attended last year's event, we had a placemat. This is a build on that placemat on the 3 areas that are of focus. The first one is data and analytics. So if you remember last time, we talked about the personas of digital learners, observers. I don't know where to get started. Explorers. I'm curious, but I'm going to slowly start learning self-paced learning. And the accelerators, the impatient technologists that just wants their hands at every cool thing they can get at. We've actually divided up this placemat across those 3 personas, across the 3 areas of focus. So we leave you with this at the end of the session. I'm sure Cass, Jess, and team will make sure you have access to that. But with that, I would just say thanks for the opportunity. Digital upskilling is absolutely critical, and I'm really glad to have the opportunity to come and talk about one of my favorite topics with a really impactful network. So with that, Jess, I'm just going to hand back to you.
Thanks, Vishy. There's a couple of questions come through, and I think they're quite interesting ones. One that I kind of had as one of my areas as well. So you gave an example of meaningful aging, I think it was, and they like what a great organisation and fantastic journey they went on. One of the questions is actually about, well, given the demographics of the clients, and actually also what we know about the demographics of the staff, often in organisations that are supporting older people, how did that organisation engage with the clients and the staff around doing that? Because I think that's the big challenge that we've got at the moment, particularly in those types of organisations.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the one thing I've learned is, where there's a need, sometimes people do put themselves through the learning pathway. A great example, one of the organizations I used to work before I came to PwC was in hearing loss. It's looking at how we, restore hearing through implantable technology and hearing technology. And a lot of their customers were in the older demographic. And so for them, I think the fact that independence gave them an ability to leverage digital technology, that was one. So one is the need. The second, I think, is having a mechanism of a bunch of trainers. So it's not sometimes the end user themselves that might need to use the technology. It's their network. And Meaningful Aging's entire strategy is influencer based. So it's not based on the end user. It's actually looking at their carers and looking at then the neighbors or the carers or their community of influencers, and giving them the tools and giving them the skills so they can then maybe print them out, or take a more hard copy version, or download it onto their phone and play the a video when they're in front of the end user. So I think there's an element of, I think, using a wider network. If you can't go direct to customer or direct to consumer, then you may need to leverage a channel. These are all some techniques that they use. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think certainly through the Be Connected program we deliver, it's all about those mentors, those digital mentors that are there to help people. And whether that's creating digital mentors within the staff team, or whether that's within older people or from family or friends, I think that's definitely the way to go. There is another question here, Vishy, and it's an interesting one, I suppose, around the need for data analytics and the updating of technology and software. Janine's got a question around, maybe is there something around software providers and what software providers are doing to make this easier for people? Because, it's really complicated, the use of technology, and things can be really hard. So, I mean, have you got insights into what some of the tech companies are doing around trying to make this move to digital easier?
Yep. Another really good question. And frankly, this is not just a challenge for not-for-profits. This is a challenge for all organizations, because technology organizations are fantastic. We work with all of them, but their entire business model is to bring you in and lock you in into their ecosystem and get you to use as many of their products and platforms as possible. To me, a simple way would be to go online and research what some of the more government-backed organizations are doing in terms of. So, for example, in New South Wales, the New South Wales government has a chief data office, and they provide some fantastic visualizations. So it's going back and looking at what more mass or public sector organizations are using, and following that line might be a good starting point. Rather than what I would not advocate is looking at the brand new technologies that are really shiny that come into the market. By all means, play with it, but don't integrate that into your business model. Look at the ones that are successful in your market, and go talk to them. I think you'd be surprised that software vendors love to have case studies on their website. So if you go and have a conversation and see that they really subscribe to what you're doing, you'll be surprised. They may actually give you a significant commercial benefit in response to being a case study for them. So leverage that as well if possible. Don't tell them I told you that, though.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vishy. So tried and tested is probably the better way to go if we're starting out. Yeah, good idea. I've noticed some really great resources coming through in the chat panel as well for people to look at. So please check out the chat panel. Make sure you're clicking through to some of those resources people are putting up all the time. There's one last question for you, Vishy, before we move on to Lawrence, and this one's from Joe Kavanagh, who you'll know, Vishy, as the chair of Good Things Foundation Board. So what do you think not-for-profits might prioritise to ensure their workforce can improve digital access for clients? Like, I think that's the thing that we're really passionate about, is making sure that actually clients and people that are accessing support services are able to improve their technology. So what are the first steps? Is it important for us to do a digital skills audit of the employees? What do you think are the first steps there?
Yeah, so two things. So definitely a digital skills audit is part of it. So I think that is a really good starting point. The second thing for me is to look at the services that are delivered, right? So you actually need to look at which services are delivered through the physical means and which of them can actually span to a digital mean, a bit like the meaningful aging example. And once you've done that, just focus and deliver one or two of those, and sort of follow the skills line right from the end user through to the organization providing it, and make sure you deliver that. I would just pick one or two and go hard rather than pick 30 and do them somewhat well. I would just pick two and do them really well. But it starts with a digital skills audit, and also giving employees the ability to grow their own skills, because not everything is provided in the workplace. I also want to be stress that, right? Some of this is things that people learn in their own time. And when your Netflix goes down, there's no manual. We learn how to go and fix it. So there is some of this stuff is self-taught at home, and the other is done through the workforce and through collaboration. That's how I would do it. But it's a really good question.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we all need our colleagues and our supporters around us to help us when something goes wrong, right? So I'm always asking, certainly my team members, I'm not quite sure how to do this. We had that whole conversation about how to connect a digital COVID vaccine certificate to our New South Wales services app. It's like, it was quite the challenge there for just about everyone, let alone people who have lower digital skills. Thank you so much, Vishy. That was brilliant. And I know we have more time for questions after Lawrence has spoken as well. So if you've got further questions for Vishy, please just keep putting them in the chat panel. Lawrence, I'm really, really excited to be to have you in this conversation today and to be hearing a bit more about the future of work. It's a conversation that's happening across multiple sectors at the moment. It's not just the not-for-profit sector, it's everywhere. What are the things that we can learn from what we've experienced over the last 18 months, and where are we going? So I'm going to hand over to you now to talk to us about the future of work. Thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks, Jess, and thank you to everyone for having me today. I'm coming to you here on Gadigal land, so part of the Eora Nation. And as Jess said in the intro, I'm the Future Work Lead here at PwC Australia, and also proud to be the chair of the board as Oz Harvest. So what I thought I would do today is share some broader market insights around the topic of future work, appreciating these might not be relevant to every single organization. We have many different sizes of organization on the call today, but worthy to cover as some of the main trends that are going to affect us, and then focus in on three of the key areas that are getting a lot of attention at the moment, and looking forward to a robust Q&A, as this topic always brings up lots of different conversations. So on the page that you're looking at now, as we look out to sort of 2030, there's a number of major factors that's going to impact what work will look like. There's already 5 generations working side by side in the workforce, and 50% of the current workforce, or the workforce, will be millennial by 2025, with some forecasters saying 75% will be millennial and Gen Z by 2030. So we have this hugely changing and fast changing workforce, and emerging generations are said to have an average of 17 jobs over 5 careers. So the very definition of work job, work career, work life is going to be very different. Flexible work is going to become the norm, with part-time and gig roles set to increase year on year, trend that we saw pre-pandemic and very much likely accelerated as a result. And interestingly, the fastest growing cohort in Australia is actually over 65s, with double the number of Aussies aged 65 plus. This will become a major issue with an aging population. And you add that to the 1.1 million less people that we're going to see in Australia as a result of the pandemic. This is going to be a real challenge around future funding, around impact on our health industries, specifically areas in the aged care sector. And just nod towards automation, right? A third of industries such as retail, financial services, manufacturing have an expectation of roles being automated. This doesn't necessarily mean job loss, but could be retraining, adjacencies, and new skills going to be required. My main point on this one, though, is as scarily fast as it looks like we're moving, it's also going to be the slowest pace of change for the rest of our lives. So it's more of a question of sort of hang on. Next slide, please, if we can move to it. This is just a very quick definition of how we think about the topic of future work. And I'm not going to go through it in too much detail, but we really see 4 types here. The kind of work we do, so that's in compliance, regulation, different flexible work arrangements, thinking about different roles, whether they be gig roles, onshore, offshore, and that's actually an interesting thing that hasn't really hit the not-for-profit space so much, but probably will do so in years to come. The kind of workforce we need, so the right skills, capabilities, right people, right place, right time. Our workspace has really been in play, especially for those who are office-based, and I know most aren't on this call, but for those thinking through a physical, digital, and hybrid space, with 76% of Australian workers who can work in a hybrid way wanting to work in a hybrid way into the future, and very much underpinned by this whole experience of work. So how we energize, inspire our people, cultures, behaviors, and very much around leadership. So these are just how we think about this as a topic. If I move on to the next slide, just at a macro level, we start to think and help our clients to think about work over a number of horizons. So around rebuild, redefine, and reimagine. And this is just important to think through, because we got this tendency, certainly in this country and over the last period of time, to be very focused on horizon one thinking. And it's going to be really critical for organizations of all shapes and sizes to be looking over around horizon 2 and horizon 3. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like a little bit later on. In some respects, some organizations have had to go back to horizon 0 into the crisis management side and just really pivoting business models. So we haven't necessarily been able to adapt. But I wanted to be clear that this needs a mix of short-term, long-term planning and investment with confidence to look at a changing future. So this topic very much is one that is quite fluid. So if we move on, I'm going to talk to you about 3 big bets, or 3 areas that have got a lot of focus at the moment. We just talked about the first one. So if we move into the first around skilling as a differentiator in the war for talent. And this is skills, in many ways, these are horizon 2 and 3 type thinking. So how do I invest in the skills that I'm going to need into the future? So thinking beyond just what do I need for now, but what kind of organization, what kind of challenges do we have, and how do we look towards reskill and building those skills pathways? They're skills that are both human as well as technical. In fact, the growth of human skills, if you look at the World Economic Forum, 8 of the 10 top skills of the future are the human skills. So looking at those type of skills is critically important. And as Vishy referred to earlier, with 80% saying in the survey that there's a need for digital upskilling as a high priority, this really is one of those key areas. And for not-for-profits, recognizing that there simply isn't the same level of investment, and we know that. So it's finding ways to be creative. I think we saw 77%, might be quoted on this later on by Jane, 77% I think of CEOs in the survey said that the greatest challenge to upskilling is time and resources. And so we know this. So looking at resources like Coursera or Go On or LinkedIn Learning, or trying to build new partnerships to get that learning in, are going to be really critical for the NFP sector. And there are some really key outcomes and benefits that an upskilling program can have, that around stronger organizational culture, employee engagement, high workforce productivity. So there's really key benefits in investing in skills for the future. If I move on to the next slide, and this is a term that you're going to hear an awful lot of, and it's going to be overused. And for those that are interested, we're actually launching a new report on this very topic tomorrow, and I'll put up details and we'll send them out to register. It's a free session. We've got about 1,500 people joining tomorrow, so I'll be very happy to have a few more attending in around the employee value proposition, or this area around the EVP, and it's going to be titled Winning the War for Talent. And that, just to give you some of the stats from that survey, and this is from for-profit organizations, but I believe it has relevance across the sector. 38% of workers expect to leave their roles in the next 12 months. That's quite low comparable to global stats that are predicting between 50 and 60% of people looking to change roles. Half of execs have no plans to update their EVP in the next 12 months, which creates this real challenge. And interestingly, within the data, 53% of respondents say that they expect to stay 5 years or more. So that begs the question, if we've got people going to leave in the short term and people staying long term, where do your high performers and your most critical employees sit? Are they the ones churning quickly, or are they the ones staying longer? And so we really have to look at our employee base. And this topic of great resignation, just to give it some semblance of some sense, right? It's a restlessness after this significant period of lockdown. Sociologists talking about this introspection around work-life, life-work balance, and really looking at job and career changes, as well as what's really been building in the background for some time, as people have been reluctant to change employers over the past 18, 20 months. We've really got this sort of building of tension. So whether workers are seeking greener pastures or whether they're just compelled to make a change, it doesn't really alter the fact that next year there's this sort of cliff happening where we're going to see people walking out of the door. So my question to this group is this a threat or an opportunity for the NFP sector? And the reason I say is it a threat or opportunity, firstly, don't assume that this challenge isn't going to affect everybody on this call, because some of those same impacts and some of those same stresses and strains affect all of us. So people will be looking left and right and going, why I joined, is that going to be why I remain and why I stay? But I think there's a real opportunity here when we think about the employee value proposition. And in the data that we looked at, there's topics like working alongside enjoyable co-workers, work-life balance, team spirit, flexibility, and this strength of purpose. as the reasons why people stay, these are things in abundance at many of the organizations represented on this call today. So there is an opportunity to be very attractive actually to the sector that may potentially have an awful lot of churn. It's about attracting though the right people in a competitive market. And so look, as I said, hope you can join tomorrow for those that would like to know more about this. But I do think this presents a real opportunity to think differently about our future workforce, given the talent market that's going to look to move around and be a bit more flexible. That could be being a bit more creative around secondments or short-term roles, or trying to attract people into board or observership roles to get them into your organization. It's very, very pertinent right now. And the final one, if I go to the next slide, is on the decade of the Chief Mental Health Officer. So this is really profiling the rise of mental health and well-being. Now, I do not mean that everyone's going to go and have the Chief Mental Health Officer at their organizations. Although that being said, PwC has just announced our first formal role. We now have a Chief Mental Health Officer. So I think mental health and well-being is going to be one of the really big challenge areas and most critical areas. And well-being actually ranked number 2 after pay. Pay and remuneration still always features at the top of the list, but when you actually dig deeper into the why and what sits behind it and what else is there, mental health and well-being is now the second most important contributing factor to an organization's EVP. And everybody on this call, regardless of size of organization, knows that there's been a lot of burnout and fatigue into this sector specifically, but into all sectors. It's risen through the pandemic, but also, to be honest, some of those conditions were pre-existing, pre-COVID conditions that have just been amplified through the environment that we just came out of. I think one survey by X Factor Collective found that 38% of people are working longer hours compared to 17% pre-pandemic. And that comes with less volunteer support and less income. So a really challenging environment that we find ourselves within. 57% of the NFPs in the CEO survey have implemented mental health and wellbeing plans, a great statistic, but that also means that almost half haven't. So the question there is, what are we offering to our employees? How do we ensure that we're creating the best, most supportive workforce that we can have? And you can see the average ROI, and this was a pre-pandemic ROI. I'd hazard a guess that it's gone up significantly, especially with the advent of digital tools that are out there to be able to support, and they can be rolled out pretty easily and pretty cost effectively at organizations. And look, my last slide, my last sort of points here are, so where do you start? What do you get on with? It's always the question that is asked. And some of it is just about acting. It's about sort of acting out, whether that be around investing in the digital or the analytic skills that we talked a little bit before about, having some no regrets move, which means things that willing to experiment, trying some new things, being able to try new collaborations, new connections, ways of getting people in. And I think to be bold, I think this opportunity to make a bigger leap in this place to that horizon 2 and 3 thinking, to reimagine, not just to optimize a system that we had, but to actually rethink for the future. How can we tap into a new talent pool? How can we think differently about collaboration, cross-sector, new partnerships, even co-opetition within the sector? Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing if we could break down some of those barriers as well? So I've got some resources that I'll also share afterwards. As I said, they include, and they're just on that next page, they include tomorrow's webcast on EVP. There's a future work conversation series that is free for anybody to tap into. We've got an amazing website with all context, podcasts, resources, skilling opportunities. We'll make the links available and hope there's some useful resources there. Jess, back over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lawrence. So much interesting information there about what's going on in our world at the moment. I mean, one of the key things that I've got a question about, and it links to a question that's on the chat panel here, is that there's a significant growth expected in the not-for-profit sector, particularly in aged care and disability care over the next few years. We're going to need a lot more people working in that space, and so I'm quite curious about how, based on the big resignation, and these are significant increases in employees that we're going to need. What are the opportunities, and what are the things that are really important for people to be talking about in their employee value proposition, so that we are attracting the right people to these roles?
Well, I think being clear about the employee value proposition and being clear about what that is for you and for your workers is the first piece. In terms of attracting new skills, right? There's only a certain talent pool. There's, we've got a finite number of resources. So this whole movement is going to create opportunity. And I guess it's thinking a little bit differently. As I said, thinking about secondments in versus everything has to be a fixed full-time worker. Or into short-term contracts. We also, and this is a really challenging one, I don't think it has hit the not-for-profit sector yet, because it feels, when we talk about offshoring or people in non-face-to-face environments, that it feels a big leap, but it really can't be anymore, especially not with hybrid work. And there are lower cost alternative models onshore as well as offshore. I mean, there are 3 billion people in a 3-hour time zone from Sydney to Perth if we went vertically up, right? Versus just looking on our own home ground. Now, I'm not saying we're going to start offshoring, and that sounds very rich and big, but if we need analytics skills or data skills, we're going to have to think a bit broader around where we get them, because we only have a certain talent pool. And trust me, the competitive marketplace right now for some of those skills is hot. And so if we're going to get the right people with the right skills, we're going to need to think a bit more creatively.
That's great. And I suppose one of the related questions is actually around how, about the diversity of the workforce and the opportunities that this creates to open up to significantly more diverse groups of employees, particularly looking at neurodiverse communities or different abilities, different opportunities. The future of work creates a whole lot of opportunities there as well, not just challenges.
It does in many, and look, there are pros and cons from the last 18 months worth of experiments. Some groups have found being able to work hybrid and remote really encouraging, and it's broken down boundaries and been more inclusive. And for others, it has actually found them to be less inclusive and created a shadow onto different abilities. But I think what it's done is opened up a new opportunity to think differently about skills that we bring in, where people are based, how they choose to work. And I do think that within the current environment, we've got more opportunities to bring in more neurodiverse, more people with different skills and abilities. And actually, because of new technologies that allow us to collaborate differently, to think differently, and to be in different places, working more asynchronously as well as synchronously. So what that means is more together as well as more time spent offline, contributing, and not having to be staring on a Zoom on every single minute of every day whilst collaborating and evolving is really valuable. No disrespect to this one, this is fantastic, but it is an opportunity to think very differently. And to my point around mature age workers, I think what an opportunity to bring in some skills when we think about leadership and career growth, and how do we support this new generation coming through, to actually find new opportunities to bring our mature age workers back into the workforce, because some of them most want to, some of them unfortunately need to. We've got to think differently. I mean, that's the challenge of having an aging population as well.
That's right. I think, and that's your stat about there being 5 generations in this current workforce is a challenge and an opportunity, I think. And so it's about how do we make sure that we're supporting the needs and the different needs of all of our employees and what they look like. So I'm going to open up to other questions now for all of you. Could you, if you have a question for Vishy or for Lawrence, we're going to have a bit of a conversation now in the next 10 minutes. So if there's anything in particular that you're really interested in finding more out about from Lawrence or from Vishy, then please put those in the chat panel here. I think, there's an interesting conversation around collaboration in this space. And so, I mean, this could go to either of you. I mean, the opportunities that digital provides for collaboration, but also the challenges that it provides. A lot of people talk about, actually wanting to get back into the office to be able to collaborate. But, what are the important parts do you see around the use of digital technology for collaboration in the not-for-profit space, and also the challenges that the virtual world creates? I'm going to go Vishy for that first, and then
no
Lawrence.
Just coming off mute. So I think, as I said earlier in the presentation, first is being able to do work as a starting point. I think we've all noticed that when the lockdown happened, it caught most people by surprise. And then the way we responded to that by putting together ways of connecting with others in your teams, in your workforce. That's to me the table stakes, right? The ability to just do work from anywhere is a starting point. Then and work is, as Lawrence said really well, is split into different types of tasks, right? You don't do the same thing at work. There are some things that are more knowledge intensive work, where you get a whole bunch of information and then you need to be left alone almost to go and do the work. There's another, which is really the ideation stage, which is how do I actually try and get multiple views at the of the same topic. Then it's how do we break up into small groups of 3, 4, 5, and start to progress that. So depending on the nature, the first is the ability to get everyone connected and have that. That to me is the starting point. Then it's the ideation stage. That's where I feel sometimes digital or virtual means don't always get the best outcome, because what happens is you have one person speaking right now. You two people might have really good views, but online we wait for one person to make the point and then someone else might forget it, right? So sometimes that healthy interjection in a more physical context is better. It sounds a bit chaotic, but that's better from an ideation. But in terms of getting work done, this way might be a really good way, because you don't have the distractions of people walking past your desk all the time. So it's really figuring out, I think, that the nature of work and then collaboration. So some things need physical presence, but others may be more prone to doing remotely. So Lawrence, I'll just hand to you. I know you also have some thoughts on this.
And look, I spent my whole part of my career sort of in collaboration and bringing groups together in physical means to solve big, strategic, complex problems. So I'm a massive believer in the power of people coming together. And yet I also think the opportunity that exists, and just the fact that we have changed so much and need to stare into this, is that it's going to be harder and harder and harder, if not near impossible, and challenges around mobility to get everybody together for long periods of time. I do think it's picking the right environment for the right work that needs to be done. I agree with where Vishy went around complex problems and the need to have groups together. Absolutely, face to face, you can't move beyond. But I do think virtual technologies have come a long way, and there are real opportunities. The challenges are people not necessarily skilled in how to use them, and feel like we need to then bring somebody else in. So we've got to get familiar. We've got to be willing to practice and experiment, and not let perfect get in the way of progress around using some of these different tools that are out there to collaborate. So for speed of ideation versus the challenge of really strategic problem solving, they're very different needs and very different tools that you can use to get engagement, but also to bring in the views of a disparate workforce or your stakeholders or your whole ecosystem, which is phenomenal. So now you can go, what we used to do with a group of 8 of us, what if we could engage 100, 200, 300 people across our ecosystem and our end users to give us input? It doesn't mean we have to have everybody together. So I just think we've got to think differently around the tools that we use to solve different interventions.
Absolutely. And I think one of the challenges, as you kind of said, is that we're not necessarily used to this. And I think and so one of the questions is actually around how do we support our people to think about change and doing things differently? I mean, we've been through an enormous change. We've had to change really quickly right at the start of the pandemic and flip how we were doing things. But we've all kind of got used to how we're doing things again now. And so coming out of that, we're going through another change process and going through that emerging space and into the looking at the future focus. Like what are some of the ideas and thoughts you've got around supporting our workforce to go with that change and to think creatively and think flexibly when everybody's pretty tired at the moment?
Yeah, I might go first on that, and just my first point would be acknowledge that everyone is tired at the moment, right? And so there's a right time for this conversation to be had. Fatigue is real, the burnout is real, and just the weight of what's been happening and the run and the pace, especially for all those in frontline and essential roles, which most of not-for-profits and charities have been en masse over the last 18 months. That said, there are some good tips and learnings from what we've gone through. Actually, when the pandemic started, comms and communications from our leaders to teams and organizations to recipients was almost immaculate, because we're in that crisis moment where it had to be crisp, clear, make decisions and give confidence. what happens is we've sort of reverted back to type and not giving confidence around direction, confidence around outcome. So a strength of a strong narrative in knowing what you're doing, what you're standing for, where you're heading to, what you're planning is really important. The second thing I'd say is ask. We can't make those decisions. And in fact, the more dangerous point is trying to make decisions for a vastly changing workforce and work environment based on people who've been through their own experiences of moving into potentially a different age category. So I put myself in that too. We are not necessarily representative of the workforces coming through. So we need to involve them. So seeing lots of those engagement models around designing, being willing to experiment in designing new work models, designing ways of coming back. How do we want to work differently? What does flexibility and choice mean? And so I think asking, although if you ask, you also have to prepare to act.
Yeah.
Lawrence, I might just add one more, is learn from two sectors that have to do this well, is startup and technology, right? And this is where you look at how they approach this in terms of the change and how they operate and learn with change. I think that's make friends or create remote communities with people that work in tech organizations. There's a lot of organizations out there that do the outreach in this. So just go connect with them and get some tips and tricks from there, because it's not that hard. It just takes the first step and the second step and acting, as Lawrence said, not just information.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, lots of communication, engagement, and action sounds like the key thing. I think one of the things that, a lot of organizations have kind of a decentralized workforce as well, and a digital environment. And one of the things we're really looking at as a sector is how do we make sure that we're supporting the understanding of what the outcomes are on the ground. So, what's the social impact of what we're having, what we're doing right now, and what are some of the tools that people can use, or the approaches to really looking at how we collect that data? Have you got thoughts and ideas around that?
So in terms of tools, I'll start off and then Lawrence might have some thoughts. To me, there are a myriad of tools. I know there's a couple of questions in the Q&A panel about tools, etc. Right. So the first thing I would do is I would go to an established organization and download their freemium version first, and so use them. So for example, we use Google at PwC. We also use Microsoft. We have capabilities in some of the more data visualization areas. So for example, Microsoft has the Power Platform. So going and downloading some of those open source or freemium kind of tools is a good starting point. The second thing I would look at, Jess, in this is I would prioritize the ability to share the tools widely across a team of 10 more than the feature the feature parity of the tool itself. Because it's all well and good, you have a fantastic tool, but if you can't share outcomes from them and collaborate using the tool, then it's an N of one that it serves. So I would pick things that work pretty much are cloud-based, they work and they're easy to share, easy to collaborate, easy to add, etc., but also have right cybersecurity, like I said earlier. And that's a consideration that's why I keep looking at the more established organizations, because they spend a lot more in cybersecurity than any of us can. And so it's making sure that you pick, sometimes it's form over function, but it's also the ability for us to get a scale and ability to share. So there's many tools out there. And in the one page that we are leaving with you, there are some tips and tricks on which tools to pick.
Yeah, that's great. One of the questions, Lawrence, this one's probably for you, I think, because it's gone down to that kind of idea about offshoring and how we access talent from a different place. So Janita's asking what structural changes are needed for organisations to be able to do that, and how might the not-for-profit sector agitate for such changes, and how do we resource that? It's a completely different way of working for us.
It is, and I am not a tax or legal expert, and my tax and legal colleagues frown at me whenever I say things like this, because there are obviously different tax and jurisdiction requirements. but it doesn't also need to be offshore. Remember, I also said that it could be onshore, and thinking of different onshore just doesn't need to be in the same city. So, we've set up a skilled services hub into Adelaide as an example to build skills for the future. It's just a cheaper, lower cost opportunity for us to build onshore skills. So it might be looking around the country as well, which obviously doesn't give any legal or tax, well, it does give some, I shouldn't say any, but requirements around work. Offshore is obviously going to be more complicated and going to open up different tax obligations. But I think the point here is not needing to only employ people that we can see in the same city that we reside if we're going to access a broader talent pool of skills. And if we're prepared to bring more flexible and to lean into this hybrid future, then it's going to open up a much bigger skill base for us to select from and to be able to target. And if we think about it then into that sort of multiple careers, multiple jobs, rise of the gig economy, some of those skills don't even need to be unique, right? They don't need to be only for me 5 days a week, 365 days a year. So I think playing into how do I get the skills in when I need them to work alongside core groups as an amplifier could also be really useful. So it is starting to think differently about our operating models.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, that's what people are wanting as well. I think that's what our employees are wanting, aren't they? To be able to live where they want to live and work, still be able to access that work. Yeah. Look, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to go to you, Vishy, just for any last kind of key messages that you think are important to around the digital upskilling space for not-for-profits. Is there any last kind of messages you want to give?
I think start somewhere. I think sometimes we could spend a lot of time waiting for the perfect answer and picking skills. It's okay to start somewhere and 3 months later realizing that's not really the skill you needed, but then that will lead to better answers. So starting and getting this as part of your organizational ethos is number one. Number two, create space to experiment and apply the skill, not just learn the skill, because I think that's going to be absolutely critical. And tied to the outcomes that your business is your organization is trying to drive. At the end of the day, digital skills is to drive an outcome, not just have the skill. So if the outcome is to provide quicker reporting, if it's to improve the employee value proposition, it's to build a culture of experimentation, it's to drive operational efficiency. Only you can answer that, but just make sure that it's tied to that. Those are my 3 tips that I can give right now.
Brilliant. And I would add to that, it's also about helping the people you support to get online too, right? Because that's key to making sure they're able to participate in the community. What about you, Lawrence? Any last key messages around where we're going and what the future of work for not-for-profits look like?
Look, I'm gonna stay with the theme of 3. I think across multiple horizons so that you're not just planning for the now and you get trapped into the immediacy and the short-term thinking. Start to think through what needs to happen next and where you're heading to. I agree with Vishy. Just start, be bold, be prepared to think differently. And so that experimentation, partner, collaborate, ask, even bring in what may have been traditional competitors to start to think differently about how you can pool resources, capabilities, learning and sharing. It's not done enough. We're too stagnant in our sort of fight for model. And if we're going to move through and actually have a vibrant future, we're going to have to start breaking down some of those old paradigms in different sectors, same sectors, crossovers, to actually start leveraging each other in support of the outcomes that we're all searching for, which is better impact for the communities and the organizations we work for.
Brilliant. And I think, just to end that, I think that's what the community sector does well, is to create and collaborate and look at outcomes for community. So that's a great place to end on. A huge thank you to both of you from me for being here for Get Online Week this week. We're going to finish up there. We're 1 minute over. Whoops. So thanks everyone for being here. We will be sending out some resources to you after the end of this. So I know people have been asking about that. You'll get those resources through that. So thanks so much for everyone for being here. Have a great rest of Get Online Week, everyone, and look forward to continuing the conversation outside here. Thanks.